Hey there, fellow night owls and dream chasers. Tonight, we are slipping into the most unremarkable corner of the Middle Ages, a place with no banners snapping in the wind, no kings thundering past on war horses, no saints glowing softly in stained glass. Just an average village and an average day, where the hours move like a cart with one stubborn wheel and life settles into grooves worn by long habit. No grand battles or royal feasts here, just the quiet pulse of survival, the kind of history that wraps around you like a warm shawl and nudges your mind toward rest. If these small lives help you unwind, consider a soft like or a gentle subscribe. It's the quiet nod that keeps this channel humming along. And while you're settling in, share in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it on your clock? It's a little ritual that stitches us together across distances, like lanterns winking to one another along a dark road. Now dim the glow of your screen, let the low hum of a fan become your hearth fire, and exhale. We'll walk this unremarkable day together, step by ordinary step, the kind of steps that carried 1,000 generations into sleep. Morning doesn't so much arrive as seep in. It finds its way through the thatch, thin threads of light brushing the rafters, catching in the sweet, dusty drift of straw. The hut breathes its slow, familiar breath, with that swells and settles, rope that creaks, the faint, stale warmth of last night's embers tucked under a skin of ash. Somewhere near your ear, a flea makes an early appointment. You scratch without looking and the day begins. Your bed is a sack of last harvest, straw flattened into polite submission at the center, still prickly at the edges where it remembers being a field. It crackles when you shift, a small shower of chaff whispering down the back of your tunic. The smell is a simple chorus, dried grass, old wool, smoke, and the faint sour of sweat that never quite leaves, only learns to be quiet. The blanket, coarse, hard-working wool, has collected a season's worth of nights. It has a good weight, the kind that knows how to press a restless mind flat. You listen before you move. The world offers its inventory. Hen on the far side of the door, complaining softly to herself. A child turning in sleep, one heel thumping the mattress with sleepy punctuation. Outside, somewhere close, water talking to stone in the ditch, last night's rain remembering how to travel. And farther off, the bell. Not the clamor of feast day, not the urgent iron of catastrophe, just a modest note from a church down the lane, shaping the dawn into something countable. It doesn't ask. It suggests. The day, if you're ready. You sit up the way a door opens on a crooked hinge, sideways, careful with the back, one hand finding the floor first. The packed earth is cool and a little damp where the roof decided to be generous. Your toes map it without looking. The smooth place where 100 mornings have stood, the grit, the splinter of straw that snuck away in the night and waits to remind you of fields. You step lightly. There's a certain politeness to morning. Don't wake everyone, don't kick the stool, don't set the day off on the wrong foot if you can help it. The hut is one room, but it has a way of being many. In the thin light it divides itself into useful corners. The corner where the fire sleeps, if a fire can sleep. The corner where the tools stand like tired soldiers. The corner where the barrel, the tub, the folded cloth become a kind of furniture that makes promises. Later, washing. Later, mending. Later, maybe rest. Even the roof joins the conversation. A slow drip where last storm's stubborn drop finally finds the courage to fall into a waiting bucket. Plink. The most ordinary music. You move the blanket aside and the straw rasps its little goodbye. There's a comfort in the small rehearsals. Shake out the tunic, find the least scratchy side, tug it over your head with a practiced swivel to keep the seam from complaining across the shoulder. The fabric smells of smoke and air and the faint grease of yesterday's work. Not clean, exactly. Clean is a word for better times, but honest. It holds the shape of you the way a chair remembers the person who always uses it. The first breath of the hut is cool on your cheeks, then warmer as the body wakes. Fingers find their tasks without instruction. A stray bit of chaff at the cuff. A knot in the thong that ties the sleeve. The heel of the palm pressed just above the eye to tell the day you've noticed it. You don't hurry. Tools that hurry break. Days that hurry trip. This is not a world that rewards speed. It likes steadiness. It likes knowing you'll be here tomorrow, doing the same good enough things in the same good enough ways. Someone else wakes. A soft the sound of a mouth deciding between sleep and duty. A hand reaches past you, finds the bucket by habit, pauses, weight tested with 2 fingers. Light, as expected. Not empty, not useful. You both know what that means. The day's first measure has already been poured. There will be water to carry. But not yet. First, the small courtesies. You lift the lid of the ashpan, coax a red eye from under grey lids. It blinks, then brightens at the feed of breath and a twist of straw. A scrap of last year's wood, thin as a rib, agrees to vanish for your sake, and the thought of warmth becomes a fact. Not much. Just enough to make the air seem like it's on your side. The pot, fat-bellied, soot-lipped, leans into the heat with a happy sigh. If there's a heel of bread left, it will become less like stone and more like food in the time it takes you to lace your shoes, if shoes are the plan today. You visit the door but don't open it all at once. You've learned that the day outside prefers to arrive like a guest, one polite foot over the threshold, a breath to see if it's welcome. A sliver of light cuts across the floor, catches at the edge of a wooden bowl, makes it into a small moon. The air out there is damp and green, the kind of morning that pulls a half smile out of you without asking permission. Somewhere, somebody's goat is already confident about something. You let the hinge complain in a small voice, then close the door to keep the warmth where it belongs. Behind you, the hut goes about the business of being a home. Cloth sighs on a peg. A little cough in the straw. The low lava bubble of water near a boil. The bell down the lane takes a breath and offers one more calm note to anyone who only now remembers they are alive. There's work to choose and work that chooses you. Today will not ask for brilliance. It will ask for shoulders and patience. Before either, it asks for quiet, just a minute in which you let the body arrive fully where the mind already is. You stand with your hands around the cup, warming your fingers on nothing yet. The cup understands. It has done this 1,000 times and will do it 1,000 more. You look down at the straw mattress, the shape of your leaving still pressed into it. It will fluff itself back out by degrees, resume being a field. The blanket reminds itself it is heavy. The hut, satisfied that everyone has remembered their part in the play, relaxes into the day. You take a sip. Whatever's in the cup is thin and kind, and the first warmth travels outward like a messenger sent ahead of you to the path. It finds the shoulders. It taps the knees. It tells the feet to be brave. Outside, the sky is a pale promise. The path to the well will be damp and honest. The bucket will be exactly as heavy as it needs to be. The tools will be where you left them, leaning in that way they do, a little crooked, a little noble. The bell will let the last note go and the village will pick it up, each door opening like an eye. But for one more breath, you stay where you are, between straw and day, between cool air and warm hand, between the world's small demands and your willingness to meet them. You listen to the hut, to the tiny sounds a life makes when no one is trying to make a point. Then you put the cup down gently, like setting a sleeping child back into the place where sleep knows how to find them. And the average day, which is always patient, finally says, "All right then. Let's begin." The day likes to begin with small negotiations. You promise the floor you won't wince when it's cold. The floor promises it won't surprise you with a splinter too mean for morning. Between you, a truce. You plant one foot, then the other, and the straw gives a quiet sigh, an audience clapping with mittens on. The shape of your sleep relaxes and unravels back into the mattress, the same way the fields forget your footsteps by noon. The first business of the hour is courtesy. You move like someone in a room full of sleeping birds, slow, predictable, elbows tucked in. The low table catches you with its round edge like a friend leaning a shoulder in your path. The hearth is a crouched old animal, breathing under a blanket of ash. You touch the poker to the coals and feel the warmth answer in the handle, a heartbeat through iron. Breath, straw, a dry twig. Everything that's tired of being itself learns to be fire for a little while, and the room's chill peels back like a wet cloak. There's no hurry to put a name to this light. Dawn, daybreak, morning. It's simply the hour when things remember what they are. The pot, black with good service, becomes the idea of heat. The cup, chipped at the lip, becomes the idea of holding. The bucket by the door becomes a question the day has asked every day since the village first learned where water lives. Someone shifts behind you. The straw does its soft ray noise. A child breathes out the last bit of a dream and takes in the first thread of smoke. The blanket fusses and then agrees to be shared. That is the house's first prayer, unspoken, practical, and answered. You dress without fanfare. The tunic has its moods, friendly at the shoulders, grumpy at the wrists. You turn it just so to find the least argumentative seam. The wool carries the honest biography of yesterday, smoke and work and a faithful hint of animal. You thread the belt through its loops by touch alone, the way a miller could tie knots with his eyes closed or a reeve could count sacks of barley just by the sigh they make when they settle. On a peg, the bedderhood waits for a colder day. You choose the one that minds the rain less, knowing the path to the well is a place where rain likes to remember itself. Outside the door, the village clears its throat. Not loudly. A rooster rehearses his role and forgets a line. A cart somewhere grumbles about its wheel. The bell across the lane calls just enough of the hour to be believed and then stops, as if it trusts you to be a person without being told how. You check the room the way a shepherd counts sheep. Hearth set to kindle. Spoon near the pot. Knife tucked where fingers won't find it first. The old stool, happier with the weight of a person than with the abstract notion of being furniture, waits with one leg a little shorter than pride. In the corner, tools lean together. Hoe, fork, the rake that will always be a little pointed in its opinions. They stand like tired tradesmen at a door that hasn't opened yet. On the table, the heel of bread, yesterday's geography mapped in its crust. It is not a soft food, but it is an honest one. You persuade it with a knife rather than command it, respecting the way it wants to be itself for as long as possible. The crumb is dense and sensible, with a faint memory of the mill and the breath of the sack. If there is a smear of fat or a dab of something saved from a better day, it becomes a kindness spread thin enough to teach humility. You hold a piece to the warmth and the steam wakes a bakery that exists only in sentiment. You eat like a person who knows how much the day will ask of your shoulders. Everyone in the room takes their turn at being awake. A cough from someone who hasn't decided to be done with winter. A knuckle rubbed into an eye until the eye becomes a person again. The small ceremony of finding one's feet inside socks that hang on like old friends who remember better jokes than you do. No one speaks much. Words this early would be like taking the thatch off the roof to see the weather more clearly. Better to let the day assemble itself without being looked at too hard. The bucket confirms what you already know. It has just enough water to embarrass itself, and not enough to be useful. You tilt it. The line of liquid slaps the wood with a sound that means soon. Your hands know the weight that is coming the way your knees know the hill that waits beyond the hedge. There's a particular kind of patience kept for water days. Not the storm's patience, not the field's patience. It's shoulder patience. Spine patience. The kind that asks nothing clever from you and rewards you with nothing surprising. But first, the shoes, or not. There is a logic to leather, and another to bare feet. Bare feet find the path's language faster. Leather speaks to stones in a way skin cannot afford to. Today, the mud will have opinions, the ruts will have memory, and the puddles will remember whose footprints made them yesterday. You pick the shoes with the cracked seams that know your gait and forgive it. The door is a modest thing. It holds off night with more confidence than it holds off weather. You open it like a letter from a friend who writes often, fondly, without suspense. The air is thin with cloud and kind with temperature. You breathe it, and it breathes you back. The yard is a collection of promises in different states of being kept. The fence is good enough. The path is good enough. The hens are already certain of their own importance. Before the leaving, a glance to the small tokens that mean staying. A pot nudged, a cloth set back on its peg, the shovel that doesn't prefer rain tipped on its blade. You pocket nothing because there is nothing to pocket. You carry everything you will need in your hands and in the understanding between your feet and the ground. The village's morning face is a line of doors and not doors. Some houses keep their lids down until the last moment. Others yawn early and show their hearths like teeth. Smoke goes upwards reluctantly, folding itself around low rafters before it can find a gap in the sky. A dog, more idea than animal in this light, occupies the space between two houses as if it owns the distance. It blinks one eye at you and decides you are not a problem that needs solving. You walk the way people walk when they've agreed with the day in advance. Not fast, not slow, just correctly. The mud receives you not as an intruder but as a regular visitor who knows to wipe their boots before coming inside. The rut left by a cart has collected a thin skin of water that remembers last night's moon. You step to the side out of respect for both the cart and the moon. At the first bend, your hand checks the yoke the way a mother checks a child's temperature, without looking, with all the knowledge in the hand and none in the eyes. The wood has its own history of shoulders, the deep, polished shine where bone and bark shook hands and decided to like one another. You lift it and your body becomes more arithmetic than story. The weight will come. The spine will agree. The steps will add themselves up to distance. The well is exactly where it always is, a circle in the earth where the village's patience became architecture. The stones around it have the manners of old people who have seen everything and are willing to see it again. Someone has left a ladle as if hope were contagious. The bucket rope carries the grease of many mornings and the splinters of fewer days than you think. You test it. It answers with the complaint of a violin tuned by weather, then settles into its good voice. But not yet. Not yet down into the water's cool thought. There is a pattern to the day, and you're still in the room where it dresses. Your stomach finishes its negotiation with the bread. Your tongue tastes the metal of the cup and the ghost of heat from the hearth that has followed you like a story you can't quite remember. The light thins into confidence. The hedges define themselves. A neighbor nods without lifting their chin. This is how the village speaks its morning. A nod, a cough, a shared piece of silence divided equally. You let your mind do the small arithmetic of the hours ahead. Water first, then the yard's modest arguments. Hinge squeak, latch grumble, the bucket that insists on being a circle when the shelf was built for a square. After that, the lane. Beyond the lane, the field, which will always behave like itself, needy, generous, maddening, patient. There is a brief, private joy in seeing the list array itself and not be intimidated. None of the tasks believes it is an epic. None of them needs to be. They will simply ask for a back and a pair of hands and a day's friendship. A hen decides that you might be edible after all and approaches with businesslike optimism. You share a crumb, and she forgives you for not being grain. A child appears in a doorway with hair that hasn't decided which direction is forward. They hold the morning with two hands and look at it as if it might look back. The mother behind them extracts a sleeve from a mouth with the practiced gentleness of someone who has seen this exact pattern of teeth and linen before. You stretch without meaning to. The right shoulder says something about last harvest. The left knee tells a story about a stone you didn't see in time. The spine translates both into something that can be carried. A breath goes in longer than it needs to and comes out the way a rope lowers a bucket. Steadily, with purpose, without drama. A fly that woke earlier than necessary chooses you and then thinks better of it. The bell offers one more note as if it has found a coin in its apron and wants you to have it. Inside, the house strokes its own hair into order. The blanket remembers it is a blanket. The pot is relieved to be a pot again, not a promise. The tools in the corner stop pretending to be tall grass and resume being obligations. You nod to them the way one nods to a familiar dog. Later. We'll do our parts. No need to start arguing now. There is a brief pause in which you consider the path to the well, and it considers you. You have walked that path in all moods, sulking, humming, half asleep, angry with no one you can name. The path has walked you in return, slowed you at a puddle's request, hurried you past a nettle's suggestion, steadied you when the frost tried to teach your feet a lesson. Between you and the path is a long agreement. You will both be yourselves and not make a fuss about it. A voice that's yours but mostly older says the simple thing that is as close to a spell as anyone here can afford. All right. It is not a rallying cry or a reprimand. It is a key in a lock that has never stuck. You settle the yoke on your shoulders, feeling the wood's old intelligence advise your bones where to be. The weight that isn't there yet promises to be the honest kind. Before going, you turn back for one last check. It's not about forgetting. It's about respect. You touch the doorpost with the back of your fingers the way your grandmother did because someone did it to her and someone did it to them, and the house has learned to translate that touch into luck. The hearth has fed enough mornings to deserve the nod. The straw has held enough sleep to deserve the glance. You give both, because there is no law against good manners. Outside, the grass has borrowed pearls from the night and is reluctant to give them back. The lane's ruts are shallow boats that will not take you far but will insist on carrying your reflection until you step aside. Somewhere, a man argues softly with a cow about a rope that would like to be a snake. The argument will end the way all such arguments end, with the rope continuing to be a rope and the cow continuing to be certain she is a philosopher. The well sits in its circle like a thought you have learned to think properly. The stones are slick with years and careful feet. You hook the bucket like a kiss and feed the rope hand under hand until the bucket's heavy mouth learns the taste of itself in the dark. There is the moment you always wait for, the echo that tells you you've reached the place where stillness begins. The rope goes lighter, then heavy again with the authority that only water knows. You draw, feeling shoulders remember their favorite math: pull, brace, breathe. The rope leaves a stripe of memory in your hands, and the bucket rises with the slow confidence of a moon through bare branches. But before that lift, before that useful ache, we stay one heartbeat longer in the doorway of the task. Because that, too, is part of the average day's secret, the not yet as important as the doing. The preparation that feels like a pause but is actually the first step moving so slowly it hasn't learned its name. A feather sticks to the threshold from a hen's earlier debate with the wind. You nudge it with your toe and it remembers gravity. The door decides to rest against the jamb without closing. Not a refusal, just an agreement to breathe together. The yard is a complicated sentence written by a tired but patient author. Your body is the punctuation it's been waiting for. You stand in the morning like a character in a story that refuses to admit it's grander than a story about a cup, a yoke, and a short walk. You like it that way. The epic belongs in other mouths, other halls, other winters. Here, the hero is anyone who carries and sets down, until the light says the day has remembered enough of itself. The cup returns to your lip for the last sip that isn't really a sip, just the gesture of one. Heat goes to your tongue like a kindness pretending not to be kindness. You set it down with that same old care, the way a tired person lowers a sleeping child into a bed that has learned the child's weight. The room thanks you by not creaking. The path doesn't start where your foot meets it. It starts in the way your neck settles, in the way your shoulders accept the yoke, in the way your breath chooses to be an ally rather than a critic. Then, only then, the first step. The average day, being endlessly patient and proud of not making a spectacle of itself, nods back. And together you go, to the well, to the weight, to the water that teaches you the oldest lesson, that carrying and setting down, again and again, is not a punishment but a rhythm, and that rhythms, more than victories, are what people live by. The bucket descends like a thought you've learned to think slowly. Rope through palm, palm through morning. The well swallows sound, then returns it as a hollow kindness. When the bucket's wooden mouth meets the water's cool grammar, there's that soft, serious kiss the day always waits for. You let the rope slip a little more, so the bucket knows how to be full. Then lift. The weight is an argument that doesn't raise its voice. Shoulder, back, the steady hinge of knees. Everyone contributes a sentence and no one tries to be clever. The rim appears, bead-lipped and shining. You guide it to the stone lip, set it down like a truth you can live with. The handle talks to your fingers. Your fingers agree. That's all some mornings need. Around the well, life continues in the register of ordinary. A cart struggles past, Axel singing the old song of grease and grit. Someone laughs once and then lets the sound go, as if laughter were a thing people borrow rather than own. Farther on, a door chooses to be open, and a cat slips through the permission like smoke. The bell keeps its counsel. The sky has nothing urgent to add. You dip the ladle because that, too, is part of the treaty. The water is honest enough to be cold and gentle enough not to brag about it. It tastes of stone and time and a little darkness, nothing a person can't learn from. You swallow the lesson and it stands quietly in the chest, ready to be useful. The yolk settles across the collarbones with the confidence of something that has done more mornings than it can count. You hook a pail on either side. Balance is a friend earned by repetition. The first step is careful without being timid. The second trusts the first. By the third, you and the path remember the choreography you've been practicing together for years. The lane has its small intentions. A puddle guarding a rut becomes a dark mirror that declines to flatter. You go around, not because you fear the wet, but because a detour is a kind of politeness. A patch of nettles is the same argument they air every spring. You keep your distance and let them win. Mud suggests a slower foot. You oblige. These aren't delays. They are conversations. A neighbor lifts their chin a centimeter, which counts as a greeting. Another stands with a hand against a doorframe, performing the ancient art of watching their own threshold. Words would be too heavy for this hour. Gestures are lighter and travel farther. You carry the buckets past them like two reasonable secrets. Back at the house, the door absorbs you without ceremony. You tip water into the waiting tub with a sound that makes the room wake a little more. The steam becomes a low fog, a kind of domestic weather that improves everyone's disposition. A folded cloth finds use. A cracked basin presides, chipped in a way that proves continuity rather than fragility. Hands do their ablutions with the dignity of a rite that asks for nothing grand. A splash, a rub, the deliberate clean under the nails. Face next, the shock, then the relief, then the small, private smile that keeps no record of its existence. A comb addresses hair as if negotiating a truce between stubbornness and order. The mirror, a disc of pewter that knows how to blur what doesn't matter, shows you a person fit to begin, which is all the mirror was asked to do. The hearth answers the new water with an encouraging sputter and then returns to its low, companionable labor. A pot accepts the day's first true task, which is not to feed ambition but to warm acceptance. Bread leans towards steam and remembers softness. A cup becomes a comfort the hands memorize in case someone asks them for a definition later. There are little repairs that prefer morning. A hinge that wanted oil receives it and forgives yesterday. A strap that flirted with failure gets a new hole punched and decides to be loyal a while longer. The broom takes a measured walk through straw and dust and the remains of last night's conversations. The floor appreciates the attention and offers up the small treasures that gather where people live. A lost thread, a seed husk, a feather fragment. You learn a lot about a day by what it leaves quietly on the ground. Clothes on the peg consider the weather and arrive at a verdict. The lighter hood, the heavier cloak later if the wind grows an opinion. You thread a cord through an eyelet with the calm dexterity that comes from never having had the luxury to rush such things. The knot holds. The day nods. Someone smaller than you tugs at the sleeve and asks nothing with their mouth and everything with their eyes. You break the bread, not into halves but into fairness, which is rarely symmetrical. They take their portion with ceremony and crumbs, then wander toward the warmest patch of room as if summoned by an invisible sun. The house approves of this ritual and stores the approval in its beams. Outside again, the yard performs its inventory. A gate catches on pride and requests a lift and a wiggle. You provide both and it rewards you by agreeing to be a gate again. A tether at the post mends an argument with a knot that acknowledges both sides. A bucket you didn't fill is nonetheless full, of leaves, of last night's rain, of the idea that not all containers need to be useful to be worth keeping. You empty it with an indulgent shrug. The air steadies. The sky settles into a color that suggests competence. The smell of damp earth pulls a thought out of you you didn't know was thinking itself. That beginnings don't care to be spectacular, they care to be complete. You look at the handful of things begun and realize they add up to mourning the way small coins add up to a loaf. You eat the modest end of breakfast, bread that no longer resists being eaten, a sip of something that remembers heat. You do it standing, not as a statement but as a practical decision about chairs and time. A crumb stays at the corner of your mouth and is removed with a thumb. The thumb is rinsed. The rinse accepts the crumb into its brief biography and moves on. A stitch in a cuff receives attention. The needle travels the short distance between one piece of fabric and another, making the quiet bridges that keep a day from fraying. The thread bites, then relaxes, then disappears into the work it holds together. You bite the end and the knot knows when to stop being indecisive. This, too, is a kind of education. A breath becomes longer than the breaths around it, as if trying on someone else's jacket. You let it be and it returns you to your size. The spine remembers the well's weight and decides it was the correct kind. The shoulders acknowledge future burdens and remain on speaking terms with optimism. The hands open and close without complaint, inventorying tendons and trust. The village hums now, not a noise, a condition. A door laughs on a crooked hinge. A boy runs with the businesslike seriousness that children bring to tasks not assigned by adults. A woman sets a pot where a pot will do the most good. A man coaxes an obstinate latch into reason with a word that would be a curse if spoken louder. None of this pretends to be important, and so all of it is. You tally the morning without numbers. Straw remembered sleep. Fire admitted light. Water agreed to be carried and was. Cloth learned to be a garment. A hinge forgave, a strap recommitted, a knot put its name on the line. Bread yielded and gave back more than it took. Hands both gave and received. The house, once again, was a house. You set the cup down in its place because places matter when so little else stays put. The door, left a hand's breadth ajar, accepts the arrangement and doesn't try to be dramatic. The bucket by the tub is not full but is ready to be. The yoke hangs where eyes can find it without thought. The tools in their corner adopt the posture of friends who know they will be called but not right now. A last glance touches everything lightly. The way a reader skims the last line of a page they've already understood, just to savor the cadence. Straw, hearth, bucket, cup, cloth, door, sky. Nothing asks for applause. Nothing requires witness. Ordinary triumphs never do. The body registers a small quiet, centered, not empty. The mind, which had been a basket of errands, turns into a shelf on which things can sit without sliding. A fly circles something imagined and then leaves it in peace. The light finds the table scar and makes it into a map of a country where people endure politely and with some grace. You are not a hero, and this is not a story about heroes. You are a person, and this is a story about people who begin well enough and let the day be the day it wants to be. That is its own kind of craft. That is its own kind of courage. A hand smooths the blanket because it remembers how to be smooth. A fingertip straightens a spoon as if the spoon's opinion of itself mattered. The floor receives a footstep that is not going anywhere yet and holds it the way a palm holds an egg. Breath in, breath out. No proclamation, no fanfare, no oath sworn over steel. Only a good beginning, done properly, which is often the entire trick. You stand in the middle of the room that knows your name without needing to say it, and the morning, complete in its small necessities, takes a bone no one sees. The jug waits with its patient mouth, the way old clay waits for a story to be poured into it and carried home again. It has no handle worthy of pride, only a curve where fingers know to settle, an old bruise along the belly where a ladder once forgot itself. The lip is chipped from a winter when ice insisted it was stronger than memory. Clay forgives what glass would shatter over. The shoulder learns the shape of the yoke without a word. It is a shaped memory, polished by use, a wooden thought that understands bones and asks nothing heroic. Settle here, it says, not there. Let the collarbone be a shelf. Let the back be a quiet hinge. The body, which knows arithmetic better than poetry at this hour, adds weight to distance and at once understands the day. The path has been awake longer than people. Dew beads like handwriting along the edges, the grass attempting a polite announcement of damp. It keeps the village's gossip better than any neighbour, holding wheel ruts and hoof prints, the point where a boot once slid and learned its lesson. Where the hedges pinch, the path pulls in its stomach. Where the pasture opens, it loosens its belt. It is not a road. Roads have ambitions. This is a promise kept between thresholds. Jugs, then. Not one, but a modest procession. Clay against clay, each with its own opinion of emptiness. The small one for drinking. The broader for cooking. And narrow-necked, good at refusing dust. They gather in a cluster like quiet cousins at a wake, pretending not to notice the day putting its hands in its pockets and whistling. When lifted, each tells the hand of truth about weight's future. Empty, they are light with intention. Full, they will have authority. The shoulder takes the first burden with the acceptance of someone who has lifted all kinds. Grain in late summer, a sleepy child in the middle of a feverish night, a tired dog the winter the river forgot itself. Water is the kindest of these, and also the most demanding. It forgives your haste but never your carelessness. The path offers its first correction at the ditched plank. The wood, slick as a thought not yet decided upon, asks for a footfall that listens. Heel quiet, toes loyal. Then the other foot, chastened, agreeable. A small mastery passes from soul to brain and back down again. You nod, though not visibly. The path nods back with a dry spot right where you meant to put your weight. At the thorn hedge, a piebald hen conducts research into whether humans are likely to transform into grain if observed long enough. Her findings remain inconclusive. She approves of clay, though, pecks once, thinks better, returns to the important business of being an appetite with feathers. You step aside without changing course. This, too, is a manner of courtesy. Past the smithy, the air tastes faintly of iron, as if the morning put a coin on its tongue to see how truth feels. The anvil sleeps with one eye open. A faint heat dreams in the ash pan. On the wall, horseshoes hang like half-moons practicing their fractions. The path tightens where slag once spilled, then softens again where cartwheels kneaded the earth to something like bread. You know the bends by shoulder, not by eye. There is the bend where the yoke asks for a breath and gets it. There is the bend where water always threatens the ankle, even when the ditch is dry, memory stepping in for moisture. There is the bend where someone whittled while waiting for someone else and left a corkscrew of wood that took the sun weeks to forget. In these places, the body shifts before thought, a good servant of its own experience. Jug mouths thock lightly together and then behave, reminded of their job. Cloth padding between them makes the soft vocabulary of prudence. It is an old shirt doing a new duty, and it wears that promotion modestly. The yoke finds its groove and settles deeper, as a cat might nest into a lap that remembers how to be lap-shaped. This is the hour when tools, taught again to be what they are, reward the hand's patience by being unremarkable. The well is still a dozen sensible minutes away, and that is the right distance for thinking without upsetting anything. Thoughts in this hour are the small kind that do their work without smoke. How many jugs for the stew's long persuasion? Which row to water first if the sky chooses stinginess? Whether the hinge you oiled yesterday has forgiven last winter? Whether the child's cough belongs to spring learning to speak or spring remembering it can bite? None of these questions require the mouth. They prefer to sit in the chest and rearrange themselves. A ditch sparrow performs its single, triumphant note as if hired by the parish, then declines to repeat itself. Across the pasture, a cow considers theology and decides cud is more urgent. The wind is a polite aunt today, smoothing hair, checking collar, not insisting on any new opinions. Light has learned the hedgerows properly and now practices the fence posts with a pleasant diligence. A style, always a compromise. You climb it the way the day climbs you, testing, trusting, remembering where the smooth places are, where the splinter is always angling for a name. The yoke tips, the jugs sway, then the hips provide a correction the mind claims credit for. Over, down. The path resumes as if it had only been pausing to consider footwear. Here, the land lowers its voice and the sound of water begins, not as music but as counsel. A mutter under grass. A hush against stone. The well at the end of this particular path is the village's agreement with deep time. Stone rings laid by hands long out of anecdotes, a lip worn by ropes that learned their job in other centuries. The lid leans the way an old man leans, carefully, with opinions that won't start a fight. Before that circle of stones, there is the briefest ritual. You straighten a strap that already lies straight. You touch the lip of the nearest jug with a knuckle, as if greeting a reliable neighbor. You clear the throat that didn't need clearing. Then you look down into the round, cool sentence whose subject is patience. But first, jugs on the wall. Carefully. Clay likes to pretend it is tougher than it looks until it chooses to shatter for reasons known only to clay. Each vessel finds a stable story to tell and tells it by standing still. The rope gets a test pull. The wood answers with a reasonable complaint, the way old wood knows to argue just enough to be understood. Lifting the bucket is not a drama. It is a conversation about leverage. Hands teach the arms introduce the back introduces the legs. Everyone nods to everyone else, and the water rises with that slow, dignified confidence that makes haste look childish. The bucket's rim arrives first, then the dark, moving mirror. The smell is clean the way a line of scripture is clean even when one doesn't remember which book it belongs to. Ladle dipped. A test mouthful. Stone, a hint of iron, a syllable of something green. Cold enough to persuade the tongue to believe in mornings again. Clay jug, tilted. The water accepts its new walls without complaint. The first pour is always the loudest. After that, water trusts you and stops advertising its own presence. Jug after jug. Rhythm finds you like an old song half-hummed. Lift, pour, set, breathe. Lift, pour, set, breathe. The mind attends just enough to keep from error, but also wanders responsibly in the tidy garden of logistics. How many trips will make the stew confident? Whether the lane shade will still be shade when you return. Whether the cloud shaped like a sheep will choose to be a sheep or a warning. This is thinking as an honest craft, not an exhibition. A neighbor arrives with their own yoke, the sound of their sandals reading the same sentence you've been reading aloud with your knees. A nod. Not a smile. Smiles are expensive this early, but something like a receipt, proving both of you purchased the morning fairly. Their rope squeals its unique opinion. Their bucket claims kinship with your bucket and then resumes being itself. Words might be wasted. Silence earns interest. Jugs filled. Mouths stopped with twists of cloth that used to be worthy of a better collar. You feel the new respect their weight gives you. How objects become citizens once they are full. The yoke claims the shoulder claims the day. The first step has the gravity of ceremony and the kindness of habit. Water rides like a passenger who knows when not to speak. On the way back, the path has rearranged its furniture just slightly. as if to keep you attentive without being rude. A root bumps the toe where no root existed earlier, or perhaps it did, and you and the root simply failed to introduce yourselves properly last time. You correct without fuss. A scrap of ragwort considers ambition. You edit its plan with your heel. In the ditch, the spare sky starts its second draft. When the lane narrows between two stone mines, the yoke asks for a hip shift and receives it. The jugs sway, then think better of interesting behavior. Balance is not Stacy's. It is a sequence of apologies accepted by gravity. Clay makes a single, satisfied sound, as if remembering riverbeds. At the plank again. The wood remembers you and offers the same lesson in a slightly different accent. You pass, less a soldier on a bridge than a sentence crossing itself properly. The house allows you back over the threshold with a small, private triumph, the kind no one needs to witness to be real. The jugs descend to the waiting place, a cool corner, a parenthesis of shade, a spot the cat swore never to sleep in and then sleeps in every other afternoon. Stoppers loosen. A dipper listens. A pot sighs as water meets yesterday's soot and persuades it to belong to a meal rather than to a wall. Hands rinse the rope-soled whisper from the lines and become hands again, not tools. The shoulder eases, grateful for the yoke's honest manners. Breath leaves the ribcage with the gentle authority of a foreman who knows when to stop counting. Jugs, shoulders, paths, 3 names for one craft. Water was never only something to drink. It is something to learn. How to lift without arguing, how to walk without boasting, how to begin without promising more than a day requires. The clay cools quietly in its corner. The path resets its invitations. The shoulder, consulted, announces it is ready when asked, and not before. The morning has now chosen its steady gait, and water has chosen its work. Clay waits in the cool corner, shoulder waits under the yoke's remembered curve, and the path, content to be the humble thread between, clears its throat with dew and small stones. None of these are dramatic, which is precisely why they never fail. Refilling is not repetition so much as rehearsal perfected. The jugs ask for a second journey the way bread asks for a second rising, full of purpose, free of fuss. Each has a different temperament. The squat jug forgives a stumble, the tall one dislikes sudden news, the narrow-necked prefers to be poured to rather than into. A palm learns these preferences the way a shepherd learns which lamb complains only for company and which for cause. Shoulder first. The yoke arrives as a familiar sentence. Subject, verb, acquired object, wait. The collarbone accepts its office without argument. Breath takes its job as clerk, counting slow and true. Knees sign their names at the bottom of the contract. Nothing here is heroic. It is better than that. It is reliable. The path observes with mild approval, then offers the morning's curriculum of small corrections. At the lane's shallow hollow, mud practices persuasion, boots practice skepticism. At the hawthorn's reach, thorns stretch their opinions into air, and cloth answers with a close pass rather than a contest. Where the ground remembers last year's wagon rut, the foot steps a little higher, not because it fears the memory, but because it honors it. A boy with a stick salutes the world in general and receives the world's patient nod in reply. A dog, undecided between guarding and sleeping, splits the difference by keeping one ear awake. A woman carries nothing but the shape of carrying, hips remembering loads now set down. The village moves like a single creature with many hands, each hand doing a small thing well and therefore deserving to belong. At the ditched plank, the yoke asks the body for a little choreography. One foot, then the other, heel whispering, toes agreeing. The jugs sway and then reconsider. Balance here is not stillness. It's a conversation conducted in courteous interruptions. The plank creaks a sentence about prudence. Your stride replies that yes, yes, prudence is today's language. Past the hedgerow, nettles recite their stinging creed. You keep your ankles secular and unconverted. A starling engineers a miracle out of an ordinary twig, weaving certainty into a home that refuses to apologize for being small. This is the hour of honest scales, effort correctly matched to need. The well repeats itself without being boring. Stone ring, rope notch, the lid's careful lean. A new gloss shines on the lip where buckets report in and out like disciplined soldiers. Your hands greet the rope's familiar gossip, fibers remembering rain, winter's bite, the spring when a wedding made everyone generous with water and bread and dance. Lowering the bucket is a prayer that has forgotten rhetoric and kept only trust. Down, 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 the rope's soft rasp measuring depth with the patience of a saint who prefers chores. The bucket's mouth meets the water's cool consent, first with a shiver, then with certainty. The lift begins, legs lending power, back lending steadiness, arms lending persuasion. The bucket rises like a moon that agrees to be helpful. Pouring teaches the same lesson every time. That aim improves most by listening. The ladle asks, the jug answers. Clay accepts, glug by glug, a dignified surrender. The second jug is quicker to forgive a tilt. The third prefers the ladle's approach to be less theatrical. The rhythm settles. Dip, pour, breathe, shift, pour, set. The kind of music that will never be written down because it's best stored in muscle. A neighbor joins without announcement. Their sandals rehearse the same lines your boots rehearsed, and the well becomes a conversation that needs no grammar. A nod is an adjective. A shared grip on the lid is a conjunction. The quiet between is the punctuation that keeps sense from collapsing. Two more arrive and stand a little apart, awaiting their place in the sequence, respectful of the order that makes scarcity behave. A small transaction occurs. One cloth stopper traded for a little help steadying a jug while a knot is retied. The trade is not recorded, yet the village ledger is all the richer. This is a currency older than coins and more stubborn than drought. The path home adds a handful of new footnotes. A gust from the west tastes faintly of distant rain, thoughtful rather than urgent. A kite rides that thought up where fields turn to patchwork and clouds take attendance. Your shoulder shifts one bird width to keep the yoke's argument pleasant. Clay replies with a single, satisfied knock, the sound of a job that intends to stay done. Back through the stile. Over, down, that neat little dance between wood and weight. A splinter attempts politics. Your palm vetoes calmly. Near the smithy the anvil has a voice again. Slow hammer, not yet the day's thunder, just its promise. Sparks snap like easy applause and fall into ash that smells faintly of yesterday's triumphs. Home receives water neither as guest nor as conqueror but as co-worker. The cool corner gains a new hush as the jugs take their places. One goes directly to the pot, a ribbon of clarity meeting yesterday's soot and convincing it to contribute to usefulness. Another sits in shade to become later's kindness. The third waits near the basin and stool, prepaying a quiet debt to hands and faces not yet fully awake. Hands learn to stop being tools the moment they rinse. Rope grit dissolves under knuckle, a thin grey ribbon of history unwound into the basin. The wrist flexes, the palm spreads, the fingers return to their human shapes. A narrow towel, once hopeful cloth, now promoted by years of faithful drying, blots without complaint. Clean is a direction rather than a destination, and that direction is enough. The shoulder emits a paragraph of relief. It speaks in the language of loosened straps, in the hum that muscles make when they are thanked. The yoke, relieved of office, leans with dignity in its corner. It has the air of a veteran who requires neither praise nor pity, only an honest place to rest between services. Water's next task arrives in bowls and buckets and the small jars that pretend to be unimportant until they aren't. Grain asks for soaking, and water makes each kernel a modest promise. Lentils whisper their appreciation by softening like good news. A pinch of salt becomes an envoy, persuading flavor to finish its duties. The pot listens to a low flame and translates patience into tenderness. All of this is a politics of heat you could teach in any academy worth its stools. A child wakes enough to elbow the basin's rim and demand the day. Sleeves roll, a face leans in, and water redraws the night's map from cheeks and eyelids. There's a little squeal. The cold keeps its reputation even when it means well. A laugh escapes that couldn't be purchased if laughter were for sale. The towel accepts another round of small miracles. The path isn't finished with the morning. There are other errands. A neighbor who slipped and turned an ankle last moon needs a pail fetched. You lend the yoke. Shoulders do not mind being plural. They were always meant to be. On the way you find the place where the lane pretends to be a stream after a heavy rain. Today it's dry, but the stones remember slickness, so you remember caution. Memory, in this village, is a communal muscle. At a threshold, the jug is taken with thanks that refuses to be flowery. Gratitude here is simple present tense. She presses a heel of bread into your hand by way of insisting you accept what you don't need because it means more to her to give than it would to you to refuse. You accept and put the crust to your mouth and learn again how generosity tastes of onion and the faint sweetness that flour keeps secret until yeast coaxes it out. Back to the well once more, with the light now deciding to grow muscle. Shadow shortens. The plank warms. The hedge hums with things that sting only if told to. The rope's fibers are companionable instead of chastising. This trip belongs to standing tasks. The scrub bucket for the floor that collects seasons. The small pot for someone's cough mixture that needs boiling. The canvas skin for the afternoon field where the ditch runs sullen when the sun wins too many arguments. At the well a quiet queue arranges itself by instinct. No one says first or next. Place is understood the way kinship is understood at a funeral. Invisible, binding, practical. Old Enid rubs the rope with fat from a saved scrap of lard, squinting at the fibers like a matron judging embroidery. The rope accepts the kindness and vows to return the favor in fewer splinters. A boy facetiously offers to lower the bucket and is surprised to be trusted to do exactly that. His face setting into the shape it will wear when he is a man who has his own yoke and his own ledger of small debts paid and owed. There's a tale being told in very small pieces. 2 words when hands are free, a nod while a jug pours, a grunt that means more than some sermons do. A sheep broke a fence. A cousin sent word from a far place where iron comes from the ground like a curse you can smelt into money. A patch of rye looks sullen. The priest looks pleased with the new thatch. Each fragment is a tile. Together they make a mosaic you only see if you live here every day and know how to squint at the edges. Your jugs fill again, but now the muscles have learned the morning's grammar. Lift is punctuation, set down is syntax. Momentum replaces strain the way a wheel replaces a shoulder when a cart is honest and the road deserving. Water's surface flickers a brief, shimmering commentary on light and time, then calms into duty. On the homeward plank, a thought arrives, that this small discipline is what keeps bigger troubles from becoming tyrants. Bread bakes because water was carried. Fields green because water was carried. People wash grief from their faces and keep only the part that needs to be remembered because water was carried. The mind files that thought under truths that do not need to be repeated aloud. At the threshold, you meet your own footprint from the last trip, still darker, cooling slowly in the shade. It is a simple thing to step beside it rather than in it, not out of superstition but as a courtesy to mud's memory. Courtesy here is the oil that keeps habit from grinding into resentment. Inside, water takes on its afternoon aliases. It becomes tea made of whatever the hedge will surrender, mint if it's been generous, nettle if it wants respect, a scrap of elderflower if the birds left any. The steam is an argument with damp that no one needs to win so long as both sides remember the chairs must remain sedable. It becomes a cloth for the table where knives have left their signatures. It becomes a finger dipped to check yeast's temper. It becomes quiet in a bowl, there for the next person who chooses to be clean on purpose. The shoulder, good colleague that it is, volunteers for a different yoke, a pile of sticks from the hedge for the fire's patient hunger. The mind, now fluent and necessary, lays out the rest of the day's water labour like stones in a sensible path. 1 trip more for the field. A half jug held back for the evening stew. A mug promised to the old man who will tell a story long enough to drink it by sips without repeating himself. There is a philosophy here that no scholar needs to gild, that carrying is a kind of thinking, that paths are agreements, that shoulders are wiser than tongues before noon. The jugs stand in their corner, good citizens. The path shines its thin invitation under the heightening sun. The shoulder rolls once, content to be asked again when asked properly. The field's path asks for boots instead of thoughts. The hedges breathe. Skylarks are busy with their small, furious hymns. The ditch, dignified in its shallowness, attends. The canvas skin on the hips sloshes its commentary and then settles into silence as if to say, there's nothing to add, only to continue. A gate performs its complicated hinge opera. You match its rhythm and earn passage without squeak or scold. At the first furrow a hand digs a shallow basin and water becomes generosity measured. Not dumped, not dribbled, given. Each hill of earth receives, darkens, and learns patience. Where the soil clumps, fingers crumble it. Where a worm appears, the hand puts it back into a cool shadow like a priest returning a relic to its altar. You work down the row and up the next, making a music of careful repetition that never quite repeats. A cloud throws a travelling shade and the back thanks it without words. The canvas lightens, then complains, then lightens again as you redistribute on instinct. At the end of the row, a few sips reward breath for its bureaucracy. The water is warm now, tasting of canvas and effort. No one has ever bottled a better wine. On the way home a different route presents itself, one that winks past the cottage where an old will leans as if listening, past a pear tree with the arrogance to bear pears in a season famous for pretending it can't. A child launches a leaf as a boat on a puddle that only exists because someone spilled a little yesterday. The boat keels over. The captain laughs. No one writes this triumph down and no one needs to. At the threshold, feet tap their small code on the sill. In, out, in, stay. The bucket for scrub rests under the bench, already half promised to tonight's floor. A dipper waits beside a jug that waits beside a mouth that will find it without looking. Things are where they belong because belonging is half of usefulness. Afternoon edges in, and water has fewer arguments to win now, more conversations to continue. A pot murmurs, a cup sweats, a cloth cools a brow that never sought permission to ache. The shoulder finds work that is not lifting. It becomes a place for a child's sleepy head to be heavier than pride and lighter than worry. The path becomes a line viewed from a doorway, longer than the eyes admit and shorter than memory claims. You sit, not to rest from water, but to inherit the quiet it grants. The jugs are not empty, they are dignified. The yoke is not idle, it is patient. The path is not simple, it is honest. And the day, having been carried as much as it carried, holds still long enough that even the fly at the window forgets its argument and stands in a square of sun, agreeing with the world for a change. When the next lift comes, and it will, you rise already in the first motion, relieved to discover that the work asked of you is exactly the kind you know how to do, to carry without complaint, to pour without waste, to walk without theatre. Jugs, shoulders, paths, 3 words, 1 craft, and enough meaning to fill the rest of the light. Evening arrives the way a careful hand sets down a brimming cup, slow enough not to spill, sure enough not to ask permission. Light loosens its laces on the hedgerow, shadows button their coats. The jugs in the corner deepen in colour as if remembering riverbeds. The yoke leans, an or at rest after crossing an ordinary sea. There is one more trip in the day, of course there is. Days are stitched by one more. The shoulder tests itself with a patient roll and finds enough willingness left to be honest. Clay mouths are checked with a thumb, sound, uncracked, politely quiet. Cloth stoppers are twisted, not for secrecy but for courtesy. The path, visible as a rumour in dust and scuff, waits without fuss. Outside, the lane smells faintly of earth cooling, bread nearly done, and the kind of wood smoke that keeps families from needing to talk too loudly. A blackbird writes an editorial from the alder, and then retracts it with a softer line. The plank over the ditch has warmed and now forgets to creak. You remember for it and step as if it did. Balance is a pact that never minds being renewed. The hedges hold their breath, not because they're afraid, but because the air asks them to be audience for the evening small theatre. A beetle hurries the way important people pretend not to. A moth auditions for lamp duty and is turned down gently by the sun's waning. You walk with the particular care earned by a day of walking, each footfall an informed opinion, each sway of the yoke a punctuation mark that knows its place. At the well the stone is cooler, the rope less argumentative. The circle's silence is generous. It accepts every hour's footsteps without keeping score. A single bucket splash echoes upward like a memory being returned intact. You lower, lift, the same old prayer that forgot words and kept meaning. The water rises darker, holding a folded map of sky in its surface, grey-blue now, with the early draft of a star pinned in the corner. Pouring in this light feels ceremonial without insisting on ceremony. Clay receives with a deeper voice. The ladle is careful and proud of its care. Everything that could hurry chooses not to. A second bucket becomes the insurance policy against the night's unexpected thirsts. A cough that wants a warm sip, a fire that forgives with steam, a stranger who walks in out of weather and needs proof they've reached someone else's half. On the way back, the path tells you new truths with old details. That shallow where the puddle likes to collect pretends innocence. You smile with your ankles and step aside. A low branch attempts a joke at shoulder height. The yoke answers by making you smaller for a breath, the kind of humility that costs nothing. A stone you know by name keeps its teeth in its mouth. We all have our small mercies. The door admits you with the soft sound of wood greeting wood. Inside is the kingdom of enough. A pot with ideas, a table with history, a bench that remembers other evenings and does not complain about this one. Jugs settle into their shade like animals choosing calm. Stoppers loosen, a dipper leans, a cup learns warmth. The room exhales. So do the ribs. Water straightens the day's collar. Hands rinse flower ghosts and nettle stubborn rumor. Wrists cool, knuckles remember flexibility. A damp cloth postpones the argument between soot and pride on the hearthstone. The basin keeps one shallow palm's depth aside, a clean promise folded and waiting. A bowl gets half a ladle and becomes helpful to bread, to spoons, to lips. The shoulder, given time to feel, speaks plainly. A dull line here, and not there, both willing to be persuaded by a thumb and a gentler breath. Weight never lied today. It will not need to lie tomorrow. The yoke in the corner becomes only wood again, grain, not the smooth shine where bone taught it manners. It looks like what it is, a tool that knows how to be thanked. Outside, the lane thins its sounds to a thread, the late cart's considerate rattle, the faint arithmetic of hoofbeats becoming tomorrow's news, someone calling someone home with a name that fits the mouth. The well's silence thickens in the cool. Paths lose detail and gain direction. You could walk them blind now and not get lost. You have already placed your feet in the right order all day. Water turns to kindness as the light turns to calm. A cup travels to a bed and comes back emptier and truer. A kiss is pressed to a damp crown of hair, not to dry it but to agree with it. A ladle finds the pot and enlarges the pot's opinion into bowls. Steam fogs a moment on tin, writes the shortest poem in the house, and disappears without needing applause. The last chores are elegance in small motions. A bucket half fills and is slid under the bench, shadow becoming a lid. The basin is emptied under the eaves where time listens and grows braver. The jugs are topped or not topped according to quiet arithmetic. Who wakes first? What blister needs coaxing? Whether the cat will remember to be a cat and not a thief. Cloth stoppers are twisted with the satisfied firmness of a plan that will still be a plan in the morning. On the sill, a line of pewter shows the day scratches and decides to keep them. On the table, the nick that looks like a river delta becomes a map again under the lamp's climb halo. The flame has its own small thirst. A thimble of water stands nearby for its temper. Even fire is improved by the idea that someone is thinking ahead. You sit while sitting can still be a choice rather than an accident. The cup in your hand is heavier in the right way. The spine aligns. The feet find the cool under the table's edge where the floorboards speak more quietly. The breath measures longer and kinder, no longer counting tasks, now counting only proof that things were carried, poured, set down where they could do the most good. A child's question arrives without words, a forehead placed against your sleeve, a shiver that is mostly weaning from the day. You answer in the language of water and fabric, a damp corner to the cheek, a warmer swallow, a blanket that remembers how to make a hill into a valley under a small shoulder. There are no better languages. You consider the three faithful nouns, jugs, shoulders, paths, and find them equal in your gratitude. Jugs, patient bellies of earth that held sky and gave it back as usefulness. Shoulders, hinge and shelf, carrying at a pace that kept dignity alive in both tool and bearer. Paths, memory taught to dirt, a map that exists because feet continue to believe in it. Each gave its exact share of civilization today, and civilization repaid them with the quiet that follows competence. One last thing. There is always one last thing. You take the lighter jug, enough for small thirsts, not enough to tempt carelessness, and set it within reach of the night. The cup beside it leans like a good listener. In the corner, the yoke is angled so a toe will not discover it harshly in darkness. You know exactly how much trouble you have saved the future by arranging the present's edges. Out at the threshold, the path is still there, a darker ribbon laid upon a darker ground. The ditch keeps its mild secret. Far off, a late star decides to be certain. The well will be ready when called, unchanged and also different, as everything is between dusk and dawn. You breathe against the air and it agrees to hold that breath for you a moment. Back inside, floorboards offer their last rehearsed sighs. The blanket is a field. The straw, patient as always, makes its familiar argument for surrender. Your hands lie palm up as if to show the day that you have nothing left to hide. Somewhere between listening and sleeping, it occurs that water was not only the thing carried. The day itself was lifted and set down in the right places, without spilling more than could be spared. This is how common things become holy without learning new names. This is how a village remains a village even when no one is making speeches about it. This is how tomorrow's bread begins to rise tonight, not in the bowl, but in the ordinary courage of people who carry what must be carried and stop exactly when the stopping is called for. The cup by the bed is a small moon inside a small world. The jugs are constellations of usefulness. The yoke is the horizon. The path waits just beyond the door, memory asleep with one eye open. Morning will come by its oldest road. The shoulder will be ready, having learned the trick of being both tired and willing. The hands will test the lip of clay and find it cool as a promise kept. Sleep can start anywhere in a room like this, but it usually begins where water has been, at the basin, at the cup, wherever steam kissed air and evaporated into kindness. You let it begin. The house listens. The lane listens. The well does not need to listen. It knows. And in that knowing, the whole map of the day folds neatly and slides into the pocket of night, where it belongs, until the first step tomorrow reopens it along the old, good crease. The tools are already where the day expects them to be, leaning, waiting, refusing to hurry. A hoe with a blade so thin the morning can see its own breath along the edge. A rake whose teeth have learned the grammar of clods and the dialect of stones. A sickle that keeps its crescent smile for the right season. A wooden fork that holds straw as a sober man holds an oath. None of them fidget. None of them promise more than they can deliver. That is why they last. The field does not wake all at once. It rolls over under the wind and shows its face slow, the way a child remembers a song after the second line. Dew holds small court along each furrow. Worm castings interrupt straight intentions with polite punctuation. The hedge attends, hands folded, and the rooks count heads from the ash tree like gossips who take their responsibilities seriously. Boots find the same old hollow and greet it with weight measured from memory. The day begins where it always begins, at the handle. A handle is a story of hands. Palm-polished ash becomes a record, taller than a man's pride and humbler than his appetite. There, the smoothness earned by last summer's thistles. Here, the shallow nick where a nail made its introduction in the dark. Grip fits itself to these histories without rehearsal. Thumb finds its notch, fingers their company. The body inhales not to make a grand moment of it, but because breath is the only decent way to step into work. First, the hoe. The blade's argument is patient and exact. It slices not like a hunter but like a clerk, removing what does not belong between two lines of sense. Weeds that hurry make easy victims. Their roots let go when asked with the right pressure and the right angle. Those that cling, dock, thistle, nettle, are negotiated with, not conquered. A twist, a lift, a short final persuasion. The earth accepts the correction and resettles as if it had always meant to be tidy. The pace is neither fast nor slow. It is right. The sun adds itself in increments. Shoulders warm. Hat brim becomes a small private shade tree. A lark climbs its invisible ladder and then forgets to come down, singing all the way. The rows become sentences and then paragraphs, each stroke of the hoe a comma that keeps the thought from running away with itself. Stones emerge with their usual stubborn philosophy, and the rake, called from its leaning, combs the field's hair back into the parting it prefers. Teeth chatter softly through crumbs of earth. Tick, tick, hush, until the surface lies manageable rather than perfect. Perfection is for sermons. The field asks only for competence. Edges teach limits. The hedge throws its small shadows across the outer furrow, an agreement between shade and soil that keeps moisture like an oath. Here the hoe must defer. Here the hand must pinch up the intrusive grasses and lay them down where they will rot into usefulness. The wooden fork carries their soon-to-be future to the scrap heap. Each lift a clean arithmetic of weight and direction. Tools that don't hurry also don't complain. They prefer honesty over drama. Mid-morning finds a rhythm that is not music and still manages to be sung. Step, set, draw, step, set, draw. When clods argue, the heel settles the debate and the rake writes the verdict. When the old furrow breaks into a new thought, the hoe listens, adjusts, makes the sentence coherent again. Sweat learns the back slope and travels without commentary. The shirt sticks, releases, sticks again. None of this is noble. All of it is necessary. A pause is not an indulgence. It's part of the plan. Palm turns, wrist flexes, fingers open and close like shutters letting breeze through a house. The ladle meets the lip of a waiting jug. Cool travels to tongue, throat, chest, a slow lantern lit along the ribs. In that small quiet, tools stand as they stood at dawn, uninterested in theatrical collapse. They are ready when the hand is ready. Readiness is their only pride. Seeds have their hour. A burlap sack's breath of grain, a palm's small measure, the old gesture, 2 fingers, a pinch, a scatter like counted rain. Feet know how far to step. The hoe turns from judge to midwife, drawing a thin robe of earth over each bright hope. A blackbird inspects the work and is given a firm opinion with a flap of the hat. Treaties with blackbirds are renewed daily. The row closes, a quiet seam sewn without thread and yet holding. There is a mathematics of straightness here that never reaches for a ruler. Eye, shoulder, distant oak, the far roof line, these are the instruments. The line wavers and then corrects, like a thought that remembers itself. A child at the field's edge imitates the arc of the hoe with a stick and learns, without being told, that work is a dance done small and repeated until the ground itself hums along. Stones speak up and the bar answers. A short iron tongue whispers under the clod, persuades, levers, wins. The larger ones get sledged to the boundary, where a wall has been quietly thinking for a century, and will think for another if given a few more shoulders and unhurried afternoons. Setting a stone is an act of mercy toward the future. It takes as long as it takes. There are no shortcuts that are not subjects for regret next winter. By now, the rake has discovered a stoop in the lower back, and the back has discovered that bending and straightening are cousins who always bicker before remembering their family. The cure is pace. The cure is the small step back and the longer step forward, the breath gathered on the in and spent exactly on the out when the blade draws. The cure is the long look down a finished row, not for pride but for calibration. Tools change hands but not character. The sickle gets a brief cameo along the ditch where grass acts like it owns the water. Its crescent slice writes cursive in green, neat and unshowy, laying stems in tidy fans that will dry into some animal's later happiness. A whetstone kisses the edge, water darkening the stone's face, and the sickle purrs at being reminded who it is. Nothing of this is hurried. All of it is sure. A cloud the size of a cart pauses over the sun and the field inhales. Men and women lift eyes without lifting heads and consider whether this is shade as courtesy or shade as warning. It moves on, verdict postponed. The work resumes, because the work is not a court case but a meal being cooked at the scale of acres. The fork carries last year's straw to where it will soften the paths between beds. The rake names again the difference between rough and ready. The hoe continues its quiet policy of removal and encouragement. By noon, the tools have taught as much as the field. That haste is a debt, that neatness is a gift, that straight lines are made of 1,000 reasonable corrections, that the hand at the handle is only half the story, and the handle at the hand is the other. Lunch is a corner of bread that survived being bread, a wedge of onion that has opinions, a swallow of small ale that tastes of clean water and qualified hope. Boots lengthen their laces while calves shorten their complaints. A rook steals a crumb and pays for it with a laugh that sounds like mockery and is only weather. After the bread, the earth again. The afternoon will be for thinning where generosity went too far, for staking where vines will later pretend to be snakes, for tamping around the roots that asked for a firmer handshake. The mallet is wood speaking to wood, a thud that can be felt more than heard. Stakes enter the soil not as invaders but as elder cousins who know the way to stand upright in wind. Twine ties at small kindness, not tight, not loose, just enough to say stay with us. In all of this, the remarkable thing is how unremarkable it is. The field becomes itself by degrees. The tools perform like an old chorus. No solos, only harmony. Blisters plan their biographies and are mostly ignored. The hat brim collects the day's edges and returns them to the eye undramatically. The line of the hedge, the blue in the far distance, the gate that sticks when it is sorry, all remain as they were and also fresh because they are looked at honestly while hands are busy. When the shadow of the ash begins to lean its long elbow across the first furrow, the tools hear it before the ear does. The rake grows satisfied. The hoe becomes particular, hunting only the weeds with too much personality. The fork settles into lighter loads that are obviously helpful rather than merely thorough. The sickle hangs itself back on the nail, edge oiled, mind quiet. This is the hour when the handles get wiped. Rag and palm and a thimble of linseed make their small blessing. The blade gets touched with stone, not to dazzle, just to keep tomorrow from needing to shout. Each tool returns to its exact angle against the wall where its shadow fits the knot in the plank, and that matching of shapes is as pleasing as any hymn. The field, brushed down like a horse after a ride, breathes differently. Rows hold their thinking. Edges are honest. The gate accepts the hand's final persuasion without sulk. Boots step off the soil and onto the path, which has been waiting all day to be the path home. Tools that don't hurry are the only tools worth trusting with hunger. They make a short day honest and a long day end. They ask for nothing but the truth in the hand that holds them, and in return they give the only kind of promise a field can keep. If this is done, something will grow. The field has opinions, but it expresses them in textures, not speeches. A furrow will tell the truth to a boot before it confides in a calendar. So the morning's straight lines become the afternoon's revisions, and the afternoon's revisions become evening's quiet, all through the agency of tools that refuse to rush. The hoe still thinks in clauses and commas. The rake still prefers neat edges over proud claims. The fork still keeps its oaths. The mallet still speaks in syllables of wood to wood. Nothing here is urgent. Everything here is exact. Edges come first. Edges always do. Where hedge becomes field, shade keeps a little moisture like a kept promise, and grass tests boundaries with bright, impertinent fingers. Hands answer, not punitively, simply firmly. Pinch, twist, lay down what's pulled where it will become tomorrow's good dark. The wooden fork ferries this conversation to the compost corner, where wind and worm are patient co-authors. A tool that doesn't hurry is a tutor in proportion. Each lift is as much as the wrist can sing without strain, no more. Stakes and lines follow, because order begins with invitations, not commands. A string drawn between two ash pegs turns the air into a rule the soil can understand. The mallet attends. 1, 2, 3. Thuds measured not by muscle but by listening. A good mallet blow is mostly the pause afterward, the way the ground says enough and the stake agrees. Twine arrives last, gentle as grammar around a clause, asking vines to prefer up over everywhere. Now thinning, the mercy that looks like loss. Seedlings stand in a small crowd, each of them certain the world is about them, each of them wrong. Fingers, those oldest of instruments, play the narrow music of removal. This one, not that, 2 fingers apart, leave a gap where light can kneel, where root can dream bigger. The hoe shifts roles, from judge to usher, drawing a shallow shawl of soil to tuck the chosen in. A blackbird, auditing for its union, threatens to appeal. The rake files the proceedings with decorum. A hat brim supplies a modest verdict. The court adjourns in good order. Midday turns to a long, reasonable light. The sun stops asking and starts stating. Shoulders answer with the particular fatigue that knows it will be paid. A tool's handle, warm now with hours of palm and breath, feels like an agreement between past and present labour. Not a romance, not a grudge, a compact. The grip is not squeezed, it is held. When the hoe draws, the body draws with it. Ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, elbow, wrist, a chord sounded quietly along a human frame. The note is work, the measure is pace. Clods argue and the rake replies. Not scolding, not flattering, persuading. Draw, lift, shake, let heavy fall and light stay, then comb the top into a readiness that will hold water without sulking and shed it without vanity. The rake's teeth tell a story on the surface, a shallow script of parallel lines, the way a scribe copies a trusted sentence, not because he doubts it but because repetition is how truth grows familiar. At the ditch, the sickle takes its calm turn. Grass that overextends finds itself laid down in neat fans, the blade's crescent writing cursive in green. The edge stays honest by small attentions. A whetstone's kiss, a water drop darkening grey into deep slate, 3 circles and a slide, then a breath. A hurried edge is a dangerous friend. A tended edge is a quiet ally. The sickle returns to the nail like a thought stowed carefully where it will be found without looking. The cart path needs its shallow repair. Where wheel and weather made a muddled hollow, the fork brings straw from last year's generosity and the rake arranges it into something that drains like sense. The mallet gives the stake a new mandate to keep the gate from sulking at the hinge. None of these gestures will be remembered by name, but all of them will be recognized tonight when boots return clean enough to be allowed in. Compost is the field's second brain. The fork reads it gladly. Steam rises with the exact humility of rot doing its sacred arithmetic. Green to brown, rough to fine, sharp to kind. Lift, turn, the tempo of patience. Worms present their credentials and are waved through without delay. At the pile's core, yesterday's exuberance has become today's seriousness. The fork lays that seriousness where tomatoes will later ask for a deeper sentence than sand alone can write. Water comes hand in hand with shade. A canvas skin, a clay lip, a dipper that knows the geometry of not spilling. Basins at the rose heads receive, then give in measured circles. A slow pour at the roots, not a prideful splash at the leaves. The hoe draws a narrow crescent to hold the gift in place. If there is a theology here, it's the theology of enough. The field drinks without spectacle. The path dries where the jug dripped, a small map of intentions carried out. The long weed arrives, the kind that believes in its own manifesto, and the long knife answers from the belt. A reach, a twist, a pull that comes from the blade speaking to root, not from shoulder declaring war. Out it comes with a faint, surprised sigh. The hole it leaves is as important as the green you carry away. The hoe covers it lightly, erasing rebellion without cruelty. A hawk pencil sketches a figure 8 in the sky as if signing off on the correction. A child appears at the margin with a stick too short and a patience too long. Imitation is apprenticeship as play. A tiny furrow is born, crooked and perfect. The rake, gentle to its smallest duty, smooths a pretend bed for pretend seeds that will sprout tonight in sleep and tomorrow in breakfast talk. The field makes citizens by this method, not orders, examples. Heat finds the hat brim again. The shirt is a flag of surrender that also means victory. The cup is half warm by the jug but tastes precisely of effort dissolved in patience. Shade rolls a little farther down the ash spine. The hedge hums its midday hymn of insects, all holding a different note that somehow makes one. A tool leans and becomes a creature at rest, not idle. Resting is part of its function. Afternoon sets to tying and teaching. Stakes align as if they remembered a drill from winters ago. Twine shows the vine the idea of up. No coercion, just a path. Knots are modest, the kind that can be untied with a thumbnail in rain. The mallet keeps the conversation between ground and wood courteous. If a stake leans, it is straightened. If a line sags, it is invited to be taught. If a knot boasts, it is redone to be plain. Then mending, because fields are as much repaired as sown. A fence rail cracked by the honest entropy of seasons accepts a scarf of willow withes, twisted till they squeak, then quiet. The gate that swelled in last week's storm learns to close again when the plane takes 2 patient passes on an edge. The hinge gets a mouthful of tallow and forgets how to complain. Mending is the part of work that admits time as a partner, not an enemy. Seeds that were scattered in the morning receive their first light brushing of evening blessing, a hand laid flat along the row, feeling for air pockets and petty mischief. Where a crow left its signature, the soil is tamped and the string shifted closer. Where a glint betrays a stone, the bar pries it up and the wall grows a thought taller. A field is a long conversation. Interruption makes it lively, but only attention makes it intelligible. The tools continue their tour, never out of sorts, never impatient to skip a task for the sake of finishing. The hoe narrows its search to the loud weeds, leaving the quiet ones that will be breakfast for something with many legs. The rake takes a last thin comb through the headlands, so the cart will not bounce its opinions into the milk. The fork settles what it unsettled, so tomorrow's boots will know where to fall. Clouds raise small questions and answer them themselves. A breeze decides to be a wind and then changes its mind. The ash lets go one dry leaflet from last year and it lands on a stake, hanging there like a warning against certainty. Hands learn the new temperature along the handles and adjust without ceremony. The body that started this day with plans now ends it with satisfactions, the plans replaced by proofs. Here, this done. There, that started. Between, enough. Evening is a teacher that doesn't correct, only collects. Tools cue for care. The rag is a benediction of oil and attention. The edge meets stone for a few quiet strokes that you could count but don't. Sap wiped, soil flicked, splinters found, and sanded with the flat of a thumb. Handles lean back against the same knots they left in the morning. Their shadows match their shapes again, the faithful geometry of belonging. Before the gate closes, there's the listening. Not for owls yet, for promises. Water where it will be needed when the door is latched. A jug set by the hedge for dawn's first hand. The line taut between rows so the foot finds straightness before the eye does. The rake turned teeth down lest a careless he'll learn a painful proverb. The mallet laid flat, not to roll and wake a child. Care is the last crop of the day and the first of the next. And then the path, no longer a route but a ribbon that ties the field to the door. Its dust holds a mirrored inventory of the hours, fork tines, boot treads, a smear where a jug kissed the ground and did not spill. Hedges draft the evening's minutes in leaf rustle. Somewhere a cow informs the horizon that it remains a cow. The ash draws a longer version of itself across the tilth and the rows keep their counsel. A field worked by tools that do not hurry becomes a place where nothing is wasted. Not strength, not time, not hope. The hand is spared because the handle is trusted. The day is spared because the pace is honest. The crop is spared because the ground was believed when it spoke softly. Nothing here is grand. Everything here is generous. And that is how hunger is denied the last word. The last gesture is always ordinary. A palm laid flat on the field's warm skin. The smallest nod to the line of stakes that will keep their post when the stars argue with cloud. A glance at the wall that grew a stone today for the sake of someone else's boot next winter. Then, simply, away, tools in their places, path remembering steps, back registering the weight of a job that will not need to be done twice. And at the door, a jug set down with the authority of usefulness. A handle hung with the authority of rest. The day, signed without flourish in the slow ink of sweat and the clean pencil of straight rows. Tomorrow waits exactly where it ought to, on the other side of sleep, in the care of tools that have already decided not to hurry. Evening lowers itself without argument, and the field agrees. Shadows lengthen along the furrows, not as failures of light but as confirmations of shape. What was straight is proven straightest when the sun writes it in charcoal. This is the hour when tools say the most by moving the least. The hoe stands with its blade turned toward the ground, listening to roots finish whatever whispers they've been exchanging all day. The rake rests teeth down, a courteous posture learned from a lifetime of not tripping anyone. The fork leans like a neighbor who knows the story and doesn't need it retold. None of them hurry. They never had to. Their pace is the field's pace, and the field's pace is time turned into food. There are end-of-day tasks that look like tidying and are secretly promises. The last pass for the loud weeds, those bold opportunists that tried to sign their names across the work, gets handled with two sure strokes, one to unseat, one to settle. Soil covers the small indignities of the day, and what showed off at noon becomes compost by nightfall. Along the ditch, grass edges meet the sickle's hush for a few final lines of cursive, laid down clean so the morning's dew can sit where it helps rather than where it argues. A stake that leaned in the heat finds the mallet's measured syllables. Thud, thud, that means stay, not suffer. The string tightens like a thought finishing its sentence. Order isn't pride here. It's kindness extended into tomorrow. Tools receive their liturgy of care. A rag does its quiet work in circles, lifting the field back off the iron and wood. Sap is persuaded to let go. Soil is flicked away with the back of a thumbnail and a patient breath. The edge meets stone for a handful of strokes, just enough to make morning easier, not to make night admire it. Handles drink a little oil and shine like they remember rain in other seasons. Every attention paid now is a debt not owed at dawn. Tools that don't hurry also don't forget. Water is portioned like wisdom. A jug is walked to the row ends and made into puddles that are not puddles, but soft parentheses where roots can finish reading the day. Basins are topped for hands and faces, not for spectacle but for civility. The cup by the door earns its place with a single clear sound. Paths are corrected with a rake's light grammar so feet can trust what they cannot see later, when the lamp is busy with closer concerns. The gate learns to close without thinking about it. Hinges, attended with a thumb of fat, stop telling their life story and go back to work. Inventory is taken by looking, not by counting. Rows hold, edges hold. The wall gained a stone and looks forward to winter with a little more confidence. The compost stands and breathes like a beast sleeping in a safer cave. The ditch shows its clean lip, an honest promise against tomorrow's surprise rain. The ash tree lays its shadow across the far beds as if blessing or just measuring. Either reading is true enough. Birds consult. Insects finish their errands. The hush that arrives is not silence. It's the overlap of many small things deciding to be done at the same time. This is when the field tells a secret to anyone tired enough to hear it. Patience is faster in the end. A rushed blade makes double work. A hurried line becomes a crooked path, becomes a wasted step, becomes a shorter harvest. But the measured draw, the exact lift, the pause to listen between blows, these make a day that does not need to be repeated to reach the same point. Tools that don't hurry teach the hand to be as honest as the handle. Together, they make strength last longer than muscle. Someone will be grateful later for the small courtesies made now. The rake teeth turned down spare a sleepy heel. The mallet laid flat spares a midnight startle. The sickle wrapped in sacking spares the edge from air's quiet rust. The fork nested into its corner spares the calf from learning a lesson in the dark. This is agriculture's aftercare, not grand gestures, but the alignment of angles and the prevention of avoidable curses. Civilization is sometimes nothing more than a tool put back exactly where a hand expects to find it. There's always one last task that pretends to be optional. Along the headland, a run of clods that looked innocent from one direction confessed their mischief from another. The rake attends without annoyance. A shallow depression that will gather tomorrow's inconvenience gets a few forkfuls of last year's straw and a pat from the back of the hoe. A string that sings a little too high is loosened the thickness of a thumbnail. The field prefers voices in tune, not loud. That's how sleep arrives here, because the ground has been made easy for the morning. The body closes its ledger as the light thins. Fingers flex and report the day in small aches with honest names. The back recognizes itself and does not complain. It just remembers what was asked and what was answered. Boots carry dust that says where they've been, and that's a more useful truth than any boast. A shoulder that carried the yoke earlier finds the cool place in the doorpost and leans for a breath. Breaths settle. The heart, which kept the cadence for hoe and rake without demanding applause, is thanked with the exact right amount of water and quiet. Tools retire in a row that looks like a sentence correctly punctuated. Hoe, rake, fork, sickle, mallet, bar. Each leans at its preferred angle, shadows overlapping like family resemblances. The door pulls in the day with a latch that understands both safety and trust. A jug remains where it should, a small moon under the stool, for late thirsts and early starts. The lamp learns its own work. It does not need an audience. The field has the stars for that, and the stars have always admired a straight furrow. And if anyone asks what was accomplished, there is no speech ready, only proofs. The straightness visible even in dusk, the softness where it should be soft, the firmness where it should be firm, the absence of hurry everywhere one looks. Seeds own their small territories. Vines own their directions. Water owns its staying places. Paths own their corrections. The wall owns its new stone. The gate owns its closure. These are the quiet titles deeded by an unremarkable day performed with unremarkable tools in the only remarkable way. Well, tomorrow is already half earned. The edges will still be edges because someone respected them. The rows will still be rows because someone measured with eye and shoulder rather than with pride. The handles will be kind because someone remembered they are made of trees that grew slowly. The edges will be ready because someone counted 5 strokes and stopped. The ground will answer because it was asked, not told. This is the inheritance a day like this leaves to its heir. Not a fortune, just a field that wants to cooperate. Night becomes official the way good work becomes tradition, gradually, then entirely. The ash is only outline, the hedge only intention, the furrows only reliefs the hand could read in the dark. The air finds its cool and keeps it. The first owl mistakes the mallet for a stump and corrects itself without embarrassment. Far off, a cart revises its rattle down to a rumour. Closer, the door gathers the room to itself, and the room gathers the day, and the day folds along its old crease and slides into the pocket of sleep. If there is a benediction, it belongs to the tools. May they remain exactly themselves. May the hoe always prefer sentences to speeches. The rake always choose neatness over noise. The fork always practice fair weights and measures. The sickle always remember the line between enough and too much. The mallet always count to 3 with justice. And may the hands that hold them keep learning the old lesson that looked new again today. The field is not impressed by haste. It is impressed by care. So the day ends as it began, at the handle. Fingers curl without clutching. The door is set, the jug left, the path remembered. The field lies under its blanket of simple certainty, a quilt of straightness and patience stitched by tools that don't hurry. Hunger has been postponed. Hope has been planted. Rest is not a reward. It is the next correct step. And in the morning, when the church bell or the blackbird or the body itself calls, the tools will be right where they promise to be, holding the shape of the hand that will take them up again. The day loosens its grip the way and not remembers it was once just a length of cord. Light thins along the thatch and turns the doorway into a warm rectangle of mercy. From the church on the rise, the first bell leans out of its wooden cradle and speaks in a soft iron voice. Not command, not alarm, invitation. Evening has a way of asking and being answered without anyone saying yes. Hands find each other, fold, and in that small architecture the whole village fits. The path to the church is a crease worn into the meadow by feet that believed before their owners ever did. It bends past the pond that keeps sky for a living, past hedges where blackbirds conduct their retiring arguments, past the ash whose shadow knows every parishioner by gait alone. Cloaks are pulled close more out of habit than chill, and children are counted with a glance rather than a number. Doors close behind the last to leave, not as defences but as promises. The fire will keep its manners, the pot will hold its patience, the cat will negotiate with the bread without scandal. Inside, the church is less a building than a hush with walls. Lime-washed stone keeps the day's heat like a remembered compliment. The wooden beams make a forest that decided to stay and pray. Beeswax answers the last of the sun. The few candles do not so much illuminate as admit the dark politely, giving it places to stand where it can listen. The bell speaks again, softer now, as if reminding itself. Benches are not for comfort. They are for company. Knees discover that the grain of oak can be as instructive as any sermon, and backs learn straightness without anger. The air smells of rushes, wax, old rope, and the long shadow of last Sunday's incense. The font keeps its small circle of water like a moon that has chosen to live indoors. At the chancel step, the worn stones confess 1,000 kneelings and are absolved by the next one. Vespers begins the way evening should, with attention. The first notes rise from a throat that has known field dust and baker's flour, and yet remembers pitch as if it were a path home. Plain chant travels without luggage, a single line of sound that carries names too heavy to speak alone. It doesn't hurry. It never does. It proceeds on the strength of breath and the honesty of intervals, laying a long ribbon across the room for hearts to hold with the lightest fingers. Latin arrives like rain on a roof, most of it not understood in words, all of it understood in weather. Phrases come forward and bow, then step back and become background again. Those who know, murmur. Those who do not, hum. Those who cannot, listen and are carried by the listening of others. The Psalms are old work, harvesting grief, bundling joy, stacking fears where they will dry into something useful, threshing pride to find the few edible grains of thanks. Evening is an economy. Nothing wasted. The mind that wandered in the field is gathered here and given a chair. The anger cooled on the walk is offered and not kept. The worry that was too large at noon is measured against a horizon of voices and discovered to be a size that can be folded and put away for the night. Hands fold, unfold, fold again, learning patience by shaping it. At the back, the last bench holds those who wanted to come but not be seen. The shy, the stung, the newly quarrelled, the boy whose tongue has not yet made peace with his thoughts. They learn that the church makes a kindness of edges. No one so far is far, not while the bell still knows their name. A cough becomes a punctuation mark, a baby's sleepy protest an amen with milk on its lip. Old men count syllables under breath. Old women count mercies with the same fervour. Somewhere in the near dark, a widow's hand finds her own other hand and approves of the arrangement. The priest is a man with a voice trained to speak across the grain of wood and the moods of weather. He has been at births like doorways and deaths like departures with luggage no one could carry for the traveller. Tonight he is small on purpose, a guide who knows when the path is straight enough for silence to lead. When he speaks, he does not explain God. He names gratitude's familiar furniture: bread, breath, beds, bells, the mercy of sleep and the courage of getting up again after sleep has forgotten to mend everything completely. The Magnificat comes like a low tide revealing stones to step on. Mary's song is not embroidered here. It is a blanket laid over knees and shoulders. It says that the proud are sent away and somehow do not starve, that the hungry are filled and somehow hunger remains a teacher, not an enemy, that mercy is not an event but a habit. The melody is so modest it could wear a peasant's cloak and no one would think to bow to it, and that is why it works. Light goes on going. It leaves the rafters first, then the high arches, then the shoulders with their day's salt, then the hands folded like birds learning to sleep standing up. Candles shorten and become more earnest about their work. The shadows discover they can be generous and still be true. One moth attempts theology by circling a flame and is dissuaded by a gentle breath before it finds the martyrdom it is not qualified to seek. Intercessions are a rope thrown across a river. Names are tied to it: a girl with a fever whose mother's breath is ragged with counting, a man whose ox went lame and fears he is next, a marriage that squeaks like an old hinge and needs tallow more than reprimand, a field that flooded where it should have merely drunk, a stranger who asked for bread and took it with both hands as if listening to it. Not all prayers are requests. Some are inventories: alive, returned, repaired, found, forgiven. The room nods, a congregation of small boats agreeing with the tide. There is a sound the room makes when the words are done and the music has returned to the throats that borrowed it. It is not emptiness. It is a fullness that has decided to be quiet for a while. In that sound, the day is retold in fewer sentences and with better manners. Regrets become instructions for tomorrow. Pride becomes caution. Tiredness becomes permission. At the door, a shallow bowl waits with a few coins. Alms are the cheapest kind of wealth, the sort one can afford every time and still find increased. A boy who has only a nail and a string in his pocket puts in the nail and discovers he will need it less now. The string he keeps because even generosity must be practical if it is to endure. A woman leaves a loaf's heel wrapped in cloth. The cloth is the gift because it keeps the heel from staling. An old man, who has nothing, places his hand there and takes it away. And that too is a kind of giving that puts the world a fraction straighter. Outside, the bells speak to the swallows under the eaves, to the cattle making opinions of dusk, to the dogs negotiating treaties with their own barks. The first star remembers where it left off last night and resumes. The path home is a different path now that it has been walked in company. Words travel between neighbours that are not commerce. How is the knee? Better with the warmer weather. How is your roof? Holding like an argument that decided to be a story instead. Shall we share the scythe next week? If the weather holds. If God holds. If the bell holds. Home is not a fortress. It is a hearth that forgives. The door's latch will catch on the third try, as it always does. Inside, the room is a practical galaxy. One candle a sun, the table a planet, the pot a moon that owns its tides. The bench, the bed, the peg with its honest burden of cloak, constellations that have learned each other's names by not moving about. The spoon is soft where mouths have taught it to be humane. The bowl is clean where hunger polished it earlier and is patient where it was not strictly necessary to be clean. Hands are washed, not for display but for dignity. Water takes the day from knuckles and leaves behind something kinder than callous, memory. A little salt, a dot of fat, a crust softened by steam. This is not a feast, but it is a table. Grace, when said, is short and competent. It does not negotiate with heaven. It acknowledges that bread has reasons for trusting this house and that those reasons will not be betrayed tonight. Children pretend not to sleep and then fall past pretending without warning. The oldest looks like a farmer laid out between seasons. The youngest like a question mark that will be answered in the morning. A mother's hand becomes a weather vane predicting quiet. A father's boots stop speaking about stones and begin speaking about warmth. Over everything, the day spreads its thin blanket of accomplishment. Not much, exactly enough. Vespers continues after Vespers the way a bell continues in the bone long after it has gone obediently silent. A man steps outside to look at the sky and discover whether tomorrow is already piecing itself together. The hedge speaks insect under its breath. The ash signs its name on the ground in longer strokes. Somewhere a fox moves like a rumour choosing a street to live on. A woman counts stitches by candle and discovers that 10 can be 12 if the thread feels generous. The cat, absolved of all serious tasks, patrols the circumference of the house's dignity and approves. In the mind, the chant has flattened anxiety into a lane wide enough to walk without hitting the hedges. In the chest, the slow bell has taught that beating is not the same as hurrying. In the hands, the folding and unfolding has explained tomorrow's work without boasting about it. Words learned long ago, "O come," "O light," "O keep," turn into smaller words still, "keep," "come," "light." Then into no words at all, just the shape the mouth makes when it remembers what it cannot command. There are prayers that do not require God to be watching with both eyes. The setting of the spoon so it will not wake the bowl when taken up in the dark. The turning of the cloth so its clean corner will be clean in the morning as well. The laying of the log so the coal will find it if both of them live till dawn. The unlatching of the door in such a way that it still counts as latched and yet will not argue with early hands. Ordinances of the small republic of a room, written in the quiet ink of habit. The last candle burns lower, not in defeat but in conclusion. Its flame shortens and becomes concentrated, the way a thought becomes a vow. Shadows step forward in civility and take up their shifts. The window returns the dark to the world outside and keeps a peace for the room, fair dealing on both sides. Sleep stands at the threshold with the posture of a servant who knows the house and does not require instruction. Vespers has done what it came to do, gathered, sorted, considered, blessed, released. Hands fold one more time, not to ask, not to argue, simply to acknowledge that holding and letting go are related arts. The bed is a boat, the room, a harbour, the night, a tide that will not forget to return what it takes in its mouth. The bell will be stone and silence until it is asked to be voice again. Until then, the village breathes in a single, long, slow measure that even the smallest could learn to count. Tomorrow is not promised, it is prepared for. That is the difference a soft bell makes when it knows the names of the hands that fold beneath it. Night is not a switch but a slow signature, the sky writing its name broader and darker until even the hedges nod and agree. The bell has fallen quiet, yet its round syllable lingers in wooden wrist, the way a well-drawn breath lingers in ribs after the lungs have let it go. The village takes up the soft labour of ending, shutters hooked, embers banked, questions folded small enough to carry into sleep without tearing the pocket. Outside, paths remember feet and keep their manners. The pond gives back only what the stars are willing to lend. A breeze turns pages in the ash and then closes the book with a last, polite rustle. Somewhere a gate recalculates its squeak into a whisper, and a dog, having exhausted its inventory of important notices, lies down and commits to being thoroughly unimportant until dawn. Within, Vespers keeps living in smaller shapes. A loom shuttle breathes once more and stops as if it too has learned to pray. A needle finishes its sentence on a hem and rests, a tiny silver comet stalled over a cloth horizon. Bread that will be tomorrow is laid beneath cloth that remembers the warmth of shoulders, and the cloth remembers to share. Water is set where hands will reach without hunting, and a cup is placed with the handle turned the way the day's first hand will prefer. These are the rites of an ordinary chapel called a room. Talk thins kindly. Stories shrink to their bones and become better for it. The day is retold as a parable that begins with a stone, a weed, a cloud that could not decide, a laugh that surprised its owner, an ache that reports rather than complains. Promises are not made aloud because promises made to sleep are best delivered by conduct. A log is angled so the coal will remember it in the small hours. A latch is set in the middle ground between stubborn and loose. The cat catalogues the corners and assigns them each a satisfied blink. In beds, bodies take up the old negotiations. The straw asks to be redistributed. The blanket requests to be believed. Elbows and shins argue a little and then concede the ancient treaty of shared territory. The smallest falls away quickly, as if sleep were a hole they'd been running around all day but only now found. The oldest drifts the long way, counting backwards by seasons: lambing, haying, gleaning, digging, frost, thaw, the liturgy of the hinge months. Between them, a hand finds another hand, and the day's last argument ends without a winner, which is to say with two. Silence in a village is not empty, it is composed. The mill keeps its stone still and, in doing so, proves its strength. The smith's quenched trough holds the dark like a coin held safely for a morning purchase. The buyer hums a soft, grassy sleep lullaby through broad, deliberate noses. Above it all, the belfry keeps the shape of the bell like a memory of speech, a mouth closed without resentment. Even the mice know the hour and edit their mischief down to a mere suggestion. In a few rooms, candles stand longer, stubborn with tenderness. A fever is counted against the pulse of a thumb. A letter is mended where grief made a tear no ink could cross. Bread and broth make a late appearance and, without fanfare, change the way the night feels to someone who had thought themselves alone in it. Here, vespers is a basin and a cloth. There, it is a chair pulled closer. Elsewhere, a window opened the width of a hand so that a prayer can find its way out and be taller by morning. Prayers now are monosyllables with soft edges. Keep, hold, mend, stay. They travel easily through rush and lintel. Some kneel at the bed's edge without making knees of it. Some yawn them into being, faith unadorned by eloquence. Some let the breath be the whole petition, the exhale and amen that takes its time. The night accepts the lot, undistracted by grammar, persuaded by need. Dreams come like weather, unowned and universal. Fields remember summer in January and give back the taste of warm dirt on a winter tongue. A broken wheel rolls perfectly along a road that never ends and never needs to. Mothers are visited by infants who do not cry, fathers by tools that fit the hand as if the hand had invented them. The dead arrive politely, wearing their faces from the year they laughed most, and sit without weight on the edge of the bed to remember aloud a joke whose punchline is simply that it was told together. The bell, in dreams, often rings, not loudly, and not once. Across all this, the church, locked and at ease, steadies the villager's sleep like a palm laid on a restless brow. Its stones cool in long sighs. Its font is a small night sea with no wind to trouble it. The altar is ordinary wood gaining back its tree courage. Somewhere among psalm books a moth lives its brief theology, born to read only the margins. In the tower, the rope hangs in a perfect question, to be answered in the morning by the one who knows how to pull without waking the word hurry. Time, reassured, moves on unfussily. Second watches become third. The hearth, satisfied with its assignment, holds its breath in the form of a coal that remembers every flame it has been. The moon, which knows all roofs by their first names, shares itself fairly among them. Far off, an owl corrects the spelling of the dark. Nearer, a child discovers the grammar of sleep, turning over and placing a foot exactly where tomorrow is already being prepared. At last, the night brings its work to a neat seam. Frost, if it means to visit, lays its thin hand on handle and latch without malice. The pond decides how much sky it can keep. Straw, having moved from bed to bed by rumour, accepts at last that it is where it belongs. And the bell, still stone and patience, waits with the courtesy of a guest who knows the household well enough to pour the first cup, when the time comes, without asking. So ends the average medieval day, not because there was nothing left to do, but because enough was done and the rest entrusted. Hunger has been held at the threshold and asked to return later by appointment. Hope has been stitched into the cloth where a tear said it might not hold. Tools are sleeping on their feet, like horses who have earned the right. The village, cuffed to collar, is buttoned against the wandering winds of the great unwritten. Morning will come shyly or bold, church bell or blackbird, frost crack or rain soft, with the same single request it always makes: begin again. And hands, having practiced the fold and the letting go, will know how to answer. The door will remember how to be door, the field how to be patient, the cup how to be generous, the bell how to speak invitation without command. Between them, a day will be made, plain and survivable. If someone watching all this from a warm distance hoped for spectacle, they will miss it and be forgiven. The miracle here is small on purpose: a soft bell, hands folded, the grace to end when ending is the correct step, the courage to start where one left off. The names change. The psalms do not. The sky takes attendance and finds no one missing who should be missing. The last word belongs, as it should, to quiet. The room inhales once for luck, once for loyalty, once for love, and becomes the harbour it promised to be at Vespers. Sleep, having stood patient at the threshold, crosses in without waking the floor, and lays its long, kind hand across brow and board, across cradle and crook, across field and font and the bell that is already dreaming of being the morning. And the story, written in simple things and read by tired eyes, closes itself neatly at the ribbon. Soft bells, hands folded, light out,